Are you in the market for a new high-end Dreadnought guitar, but want to focus more on the core sound and less on the frills? Well, we've got 3 options that will be perfect for you to check out. Before we introduce the models, I should explain a little bit about how we're going to go about this video today. We're going to compare these guitars back to back with some playing examples, both strummed and fingerpicked, and we're going to analyse the tones too, and also what you get for your money. First up, we had to choose the Martin D18. As the iconic, no frills, high quality made acoustic guitar, this is perfect. It's got a Sitka spruce top and mahogany back and sides, a theme which you're going to see throughout the 3 guitars. The standout appointments for this guitar is that it's got a forward shifted X-brace pattern and a 1 3/4 inch nut width. Okay, so it wouldn't be a proper Dreadnought comparison without including the staple Gibson J45 standard. Now, the initial takeaway from this one is that it's a sloped shoulder Dreadnought, not square shouldered like the D18, but it does still retain the mahogany back and sides and Sitka spruce top. You get a rosewood fretboard, which we don't feel will negatively impact this comparison because we don't think it's going to affect the tone that much. What you do get with this though is hand scalloped advanced X bracing in there and a slightly narrower 1 7 1/4 inch nut width. And finally, we've picked a guitar from the UK, an Atkin Essential D. Now this has all the same ingredients as the original Martin D18. They've gone for pre-war specs, so what you've got is a torrefied or baked Sitka spruce top, and they also bake the bracing inside, which is a pre-war scalloped X bracing shape. Now, what the baking does is it takes some of the moisture out of the wood and gives a more vintage sound to the guitar. This one has the narrowest nut width at 1 11/16. Okay, it's time to do the sound comparisons. Now, before we do these comparisons, I think it'd be good to explain kind of what I look for when checking out acoustic guitars. First up, I want to know how wide the frequency response is and which frequency points it might emphasize. Could it be bass? Could it be lower mids, upper mids, or even trebles? Or which combination of 2 or maybe 3 of those? Next up, I want to know how much effort I have to put into it, so how hard I have to hit it when I'm strumming, to see how much volume I'm going to get out of it and how hard can I hit it before it starts to compress. And finally, I want to know the overall character of the guitar, which effectively really is a combination of the first 2 points we're checking out. So let's get into it. So I would say that after listening back to these as well, the Martin for me was very smooth sounding. It had kind of a nice amount of low mids. It did compress, so if you dug in quite hard, it didn't really get a lot louder. Moving on, the J45 had a bit more brightness, but with a real mid-range hump. Looking at the Atkin, it's got this great kind of chime to it. It's very loud. You didn't have to put a lot into it strumming wise to get a lot of volume out, and it took a lot to compress. You'd really have to hit that thing hard. What I would say that was interesting about the Atkin is when you sit and play it, you get this real kind of bass thud in your chest. You can feel the whole thing vibrating, but I don't think that travels out the front of the guitar very far. So it does come across as being a lot brighter than the other 2. So for me, I think the Martin nailed the strumming test. If you're watching this video, chances are you're not already subscribed to the channel. So hit the subscribe button now to stay up to date with our latest content. All right, so after playing them with my fingers, I kind of felt that the Atkin for me was the best guitar for the way that I play. Because I play with the pads of my fingers, I don't use the nails, and I don't tend to use like any finger or thumb picks. Having that really bright character really helps with the guitar, just, you know, and the available volume meant I didn't have to dig in hard either. The Martin, because it's so smooth and compressed, actually it was interesting because it kept everything in this really nice window, so the volume didn't go up or down, and the character and kind of fullness and brightness of each note stayed the same throughout. The J45, the character really shone through on that because of its kind of woody bass notes on there as well. Okay, now on to the final test, the capo test, which is very important to a lot of people. We do get a lot of guys who come into the shop with capos when they test acoustics to see how they kind of do when you start putting it on further up the neck. I think the 7th fret is a really good test for that, partly because once you get up to the 9th fret, it's really hard to fit your fingers in. So for me, with sort of slightly stubby fingers, the 7th fret's a good spot. I really felt the J45 did extremely well in this part. I think because it kept a lot of the character there, it's very sweet sounding, and because of that woody mid-range on there and the hump, it just held the notes together really nicely. The Atkin was interesting because actually it sounded really plucky, but not in a bad way. It kind of had this real mandolin quality. Every note had this sort of power and clarity to it that would just cut through any mix. Lastly, the Martin. Now, that was interesting because, as I said earlier, that it kind of compresses quite quickly and the volume is very even. It doesn't have a massive frequency response, it's quite focused, and by adding the capo on, we took some of the bass away and some of the power. However, it did still retain a lot of that Martin tonality and some of the warmth too. Whew. So, okay, after trying all three of those guitars and having preferences in different areas, I can honestly say that overall, I don't think there's a right or wrong guitar. Whatever one you go for, you're still getting a great quality guitar. And, you know, in terms of settings, where you're going to use these, I think for me, the Martin actually would accompany like a solo singer who's got a really nice voice perfectly. I think the Atkin, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, you know, really bright and plucky. Maybe in a bluegrass setting or a country setting, it's going to cut through that mix really nicely. The J45, it's got to be rock band all day long. You know, I can just see that fitting that sort of hi-hat window, frequency window, where it's just going to be strummed almost in a percussive way, but just look really cool at the same time. So, like I said, there's no right or wrong, just whatever works for you. And I would love to hear what you hear about the guitar as well. You know, put in the comments below which one you preferred and why. It'd be really useful for us. As always, thanks for watching. And if you want to find out any more about these great guitars, the links will be in the description below.